My name is David Dewey. I'm the Director of Research here at PinDrop Security. There's basically three ways to rob a bank. There's the physical aspect, bust down the door with a gun and demand the money. In 80% of the cases, 80% of the money is recovered within 48 hours. The second avenue would be online, people targeting the web interface of your bank, trying to find vulnerabilities or using compromised credentials. Obviously, this has been a focus of security for many banks over the last several years. That led to an increase of phone fraud. The phone is really the weakest link that allows interface with a bank. Much of that is due to lack of innovation. It just hasn't been an area of focus of research. There's also a very strong lack of identity over the phone. When someone calls in, the only thing you have is a caller ID, which can't be trusted because it's so easily spoofed, and the name that they give you. There's very low barriers to entry. Spoofing a phone number is extremely simple. And those knowledge-based authentication questions are often very easily bypassable. We did an interesting exercise here within our office where one of our researchers and I sat side by side, and I called into his bank and pretended to be him. When they asked us the knowledge-based authentication questions, I simply Googled his name, and there I had every single answer to every question that was asked of me. Phone fraud is on the rise. We're seeing a 30% increase in phone fraud. The average loss per call that our banking customers are incurring is 57 cents. This can equate to be very huge numbers. And on average, our banking customers are facing about $7.6 million in fraud exposure. All of this boils down to social engineering. This is any act that influences a person to take action that may or may not be in their best interest. And so you'll see some interesting techniques that fraudsters will use when it comes to social engineering. The first one is authority. Oftentimes, the fraudster will call in claiming to be a person of authority, and the customer support representative that allows them to do what it is that they want to do. Sometimes they'll use charm. Another interesting scenario that we saw was when a fraudster was presented with a knowledge-based authentication question, very common one. He was asked what his mother's maiden name was. He responded with, "Well, my father married 3 times. Can I get 3 guesses?" And the customer support representative gave him 3 guesses. Then obviously there's anger. When people start getting frustrated with KBAs, fraudsters will often, I'm one of your biggest customers. I don't have time for this. That's enough. The main goal for these folks when they're launching these social engineering attacks is account takeover. They want to impersonate legitimate customers to gain control of an account and eventually transfer money out of the account. So oftentimes when they're calling in for reconnaissance, they'll ask for things like account balance. This is information that they can later use for authentication, but it's also important to them to know that they're targeting accounts that are of high value. They can change the contact information so that the real customer doesn't ever get notified. Travel notification, this is a very common technique where someone will compromise an account. They'll call in and claim to be traveling. They'll say, I'm heading overseas. Please lift the fraud triggers. They'll change the password or PIN so they can have access to the ATM or online banking. I provided some statistics earlier on about the number of calls and the type of fraud that our customers are being faced with. The first thing that we use is what we call phone printing. This is a technology that allows us to uniquely identify a device making a phone call into a call center. On top of that, we have what we call our PhonePot or phone honeypot. This is what we believe is the world's largest phone honeypot. We have access to about 500,000 unlisted numbers, and we just receive phone calls all day long. We're able to analyze the statistics and the types of scams that are being perpetrated. And then we have what we call our topic modeler. What this allows us to do is mine through about 45 million consumer complaints. So that allows us to see what are the top scams that they're facing. And this slide just describes the phone printing technology that I mentioned, which is the cornerstone of our product offering. This is what allows us to uniquely identify devices as they call in to our customers, identify the type of service that's being used when they call in, where they're calling from, and it's additional risk factors that allow our customers to make a sound decision about whether they should treat the call as legitimate or not.
Okay, thanks, David.